What was the narrative at the end of Saturday night's game against Penn State? What are some things that Ohio State needs to fix going into their matchup this week with Nebraska? And some college football playoff ranking predictions from Mr. Drew Crabtree, managing editor of LWO Sports. As him and I have a fun time recapping last week's game and looking ahead to this week's matchup with the Cornhuskers. All that and more in today's episode of Locked On Buckeyes.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Tuesday, November the 2nd in the year 2021. And on Expert Tuesday, as this is, we're here with another guest to help us recap the game that we just watched. Also, a little prediction about the college football playoff rankings that come out tonight at the end of the show. Today with us is Drew Crabtree, the managing editor of Last Word on Sports. Drew, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right. Jay, thanks for having me on. It's an honor. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing very well. A lot better. Not frustration that I had at the end of Saturday night's game. I was frustrated because I do believe the Buckeyes could have won bigger, a wider margin of victory than they had Saturday evening. As you watched the game, as the game ended, a couple of days to recap and think things through, what are some thoughts you have at the conclusion of Saturday's game, a 9-point victory over the Nittany Lions?
Well, first off, I absolutely agree with you. The Buckeyes started off pretty anemic. And then, if they can convert any of those field goals, you said what the four field goals, Ruggles, which, the ball game, the game ball, words are hard, that you gave out yesterday was, spot on. He stepped up in the biggest moment, and his 4 field goals were the difference. But if the Buckeyes could convert any of them, especially the one, we know that it was 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 from Penn State's 1. And then, Henderson kind of had a freshman moment. He was just ready. He was ready to go. You can, convert any of those into touchdowns. Like, it's a completely different game. It's a completely different narrative. It was extremely frustrating because this is kind of how it's been with Penn State recently. Like, Ohio State comes in, it seems like they are ridiculously overmatched in terms of like the talent and the coaching and everything. But Penn State comes in so inspired that, Sean Clifford turns into some freak show. I'm glad they got away with the, a 9-point victory, which is, ridiculous to say, but I feel like it could have been a whole lot worse.
It could have been. And going into the game, and I talked about this last week when I was talking with Kevin McGuire from Locked On Nittany Lions, him and I both agreed that the game was going to be Ohio State's win. The one thing that we differed on, well, he didn't really mention it. I said, I don't know if Ohio State covers the wide margin, the covers the spread in that game, because for some reason in these Penn State games, things are always tricky. Things are always interesting. No matter if it's in Happy Valley or in Columbus, things are always a little bit trickier than what you expect. Ohio State should have won. It could have won by 3 touchdowns. I mean, they're that much better to me than that Penn State team that we saw on Saturday evening. But some of the little details with this team were what kind of directed the narrative in the way that it is right now with us. I was frustrated after the game for so many reasons. But I think offensively, some of the play calling, you mentioned some of the stuff, short yardage on the goal line. That 4th and 2 call on the 38, on Penn State's 38, where Ryan Day had the perfect play set up, where Olave was open. I think in the moment, even if you're saying yes, go for it now, I think you tried for a field goal because points were very, very vital in that moment, and that could have derailed and could have been really, really bad for you. I'm not sure how Ryan Day goes forward? Will he continue to try to go for things because he has a better talent? Or, Drew, do you think that Ryan Day may try to take the points? Because in games like that, points are precious.
I think these next 2 weeks, of course, Nebraska and Purdue, on paper, the Buckeyes should just run away. Like it should be game over. Stroud should probably take one series in the third quarter, and we get to see Kyle McCord for the rest of the way. But when it comes to when they get to Sparty and Kenneth Walker, and God help us if he puts up a 5 touchdown performance against our defense.
Right.
My goodness. Points are definitely going to be maybe not as much at a premium, but it's going to be a score. It might be a slugfest, and taking points when the opportunity presents itself is definitely going to be a massive thing because there were obviously Buckeye Twitter fingers. Everyone's freaking out that we punted fourth and 3 on the 46. You don't tend to punt that because it's usually if you convert that, the opportunity for points is ridiculously high. But maybe he saw something in pregame, or he talked to Ruggles, because those 4 field goals were kind of knuckleballs. And then you saw when Penn State kicked it, that like their shank was the ugliest kick that I've ever seen. But I think moving forward, it's going to be cracking down on the third down defense. Goodness gracious. And then those weird offensive procedure penalties. We had 5 or 6 false starts, and then Whippler's botched snaps, which were ridiculous. I think Coach Day is definitely going to be pressuring them to fix those and get right, because the way that Sparty and little brother are playing, they'll take advantage of those.
They will. They will. And I know when you try to fix the little things, the pre-snap penalties, the third, fourth down calls, the plays you're running, personnel groupings, those are things that separate the pretenders, the contenders. And then when you get to the contenders, where I do believe, and I think everyone believes, Ohio State is a contender this year, there's a reason why Georgia is number 1, and then there's everybody else. Beginning of the season, it was Georgia, Alabama, and everybody else. In many people's eyes, I do think Ohio State is really good. But Georgia has that one thing they're dominant at, and nobody's been able to stop that. I'm not sure if Ohio State has that one thing they're dominant with against big opponents, against elite opponents or really good teams. Penn State has a really good defense. I'm not sure if they have that one thing offensively or defensively. Well, defensively possibly, but offensively, do you think there's one thing that Ohio State is good at on offense that no matter against anybody, whoever they play, they can do this one thing and be successful? Excuse me.
Well, going into this game, it was just about everything. The recent, the 3 or 4 weeks, Trevion Henderson could not be stopped. CJ Stroud was, pinpoint money. And then you had Olave, Garrett Wilson, and, Jackson Smith and Jigba just absolutely going off. And I think that going into this game, Ryan Day, honestly, should I say James Franklin, he came into this game and it looked like their defensive game plan was, we're not going to get beat by Trevion Henderson. Judging by, the first half inefficiencies, like, Trevion Henderson literally went into the half with 6 yards off of 9 carries. And that's nothing that we've seen up to this point. And then the second half, Ryan Day out of the locker room, he's like, okay, we'll take that. And then after that 56-yard bomb to Jackson Smith and Jigba to open up their first possession, after the thick 6 at the end of the second half, the Buckeyes literally ran the ball 12 times in a row without that, defensive offside penalty that was, got him offside, threw it to Garrett Wilson, and, Joey Porter's like, yeah. No. It was 12 Henderson runs in a row. And Ryan Day was like, you know what? You're going to try and take away our best athlete. At least maybe that's what they feel. We're just going to continue to run it down your throat. And it worked and it didn't. Like, they got what they needed to, but that was part of the, 3rd and goal, 4th and goal from the 1, and then Trevion Henderson false start. Because in the third quarter, it was literally just Trevion Henderson. Buckeyes attempted 2 passes.
Those 2 passes, those are good things that I think it's going to be. I think I was expecting more runs early and then less passing. I understand why they went to the more passes early on in the game. I know a lot of that stuff is scripted as well. I was expecting for Matt Jones to play with the other 5 starting offensive linemen. I mean, it worked for Illinois, and your offensive linemen are better than Illinois'. Your running backs are better than Illinois'. So you would think that maybe I was expecting too much. I don't know. But I was expecting a little wrinkle of what worked for Illinois against Penn State, what's worked for you all season long, and then try to mix the 2 together so that James Franklin and the defense has no idea what's coming with this offense. Defensively, speaking of one thing for the offense that should be able to work against anybody, does this defense have anything that will work against any team in the country?
Realistically, that defensive line should be an elite defensive line. Now, you said on the episode yesterday that, the Buckeyes were getting held left and right, and, we're not going to blame officials, but it was pretty bad. But even despite that, Tyreke Smith was still getting pressure. And there was a 1 sack, I believe, in the second or third quarter, and Tyreke Smith came around JT Tuimoloau. I can say it right 90% of the time. Fake like he was coming in, drop back as if he was a spy, and then once Clifford got flushed, he came in and cleaned him up. So that pass rush should be the strength of the defense as it's been in the past. The secondary is not too bad with Denzel Burke really playing not like a true freshman. But and then obviously Ronnie Hickman is finally taking a step forward, and he's leading the team in just about every statistical measure other than passing yards. But yeah, that defensive line should be the go-to. Only rush 4, drop everyone back, and still get a sack. That should be the expectation for the Buckeyes.
Drew, I'm right there with you. I believe that should be the expectation. I do think that we saw some flashes of really good things in the pass rush, but it seemed like things were a lot different with Tyreke Smith back on the field. Drew, did you see the same thing I did with his presence? Just simply his presence there seemed like everybody else was feeding off of his energy.
I think that was a massive thing. It's just like with Jonathan Cooper a couple of years ago. You take him off the field, you still got you got ridiculous studs. You got, Jack Sawyer, Tuimoloau, Talik Williams, who has come out of nowhere as a true freshman. Then Zach Harrison, obviously. They're all 5-star athletes, but you put in the leadership of Tyreke Smith, and it just takes him from here to even higher. And even if he wasn't getting the sacks, he was always disrupting. And the one thing I did note when I was watching was the right tackle for Penn State. Every time it was he got beat by Tyreke Smith quite a few times, but every time it was one of the freshmen between Tuimoloau and Sawyer, he was just bear hugging him. And even then, they strong arming him, and it was hilarious to watch. And I think that we have a lot to look forward to between those two.
Absolutely. I wonder, I know Ohio State basketball is coming up. First game, I think, is a week from today, with this airing on Tuesday. I wonder how if Tuimoloau is going to try to play basketball at the end of the season in January, leave Ryan Day, go to Chris Holtmann. You're in shape, but football shape is different than basketball shape. Absolutely. And the basketball team is already going to be right there and starting or in the middle of their Big Ten basketball season schedule, which is grueling, tough battles. I wonder if he's going to try to play both sports. It's going to be very, very tough, Drew, for him to go from football to basketball when he's joining the basketball team in the middle of the season.
Just because I'm selfish and I love to watch playmakers and just do all those things, I also want to see DeJuan Jones on the basketball court. But if they were able to get Tuimoloau out in there, just at least every now and then, it would be the greatest thing. But I mean, honestly, for his football career and for everything like that, I would prefer that he, stay off the court and continue to dedicate to, bettering his product, because he's ridiculously good already.
Yes.
Like this, yes. The kid, he signed on July 4th, yes. And he was making impact plays in week 1 and 2. Like, that just doesn't happen as an 18-year-old.
No, it doesn't. You mentioned DeJuan Jones. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. I live here now, and I saw DeJuan Jones play high school basketball. I want to say I know at least 2 years, maybe 3 years at the varsity level. And let me tell you, I have never seen a guy that big with footwork like him, vision like him, being able to run up and down the court. And he's just a big kid. He's just out there having fun. We see him on the football field, the fun that he's having out there. It's the same way on the basketball court. I'm not sure Ryan Day wants him to play basketball, because you're going to lose. If he's 360 now, he's probably going to lose about 10, 15 pounds, because the conditioning that he's going to do with the basketball team, different than football. I don't know, man. Just think about it. If Holtman had DeJuan Jones and Tuamaloa out on the same, joining the team in January, that could be a lot of size, a lot of mass, a lot of muscle, and versatility that other schools just don't have.
That's also one of the things that I have been extremely frustrated with Buckeye basketball in recent years, is they just lack that size. Like, Sullinger was awesome back in the day, but even Zed Key is good, but he's not the presence that other teams have. And I mean, maybe he can come on. Maybe they're both just ridiculous athletes that can both come on and contribute right away, which would be awesome, because they've already got all the other pieces. Maybe a big guy is just the next thing they need to take the next step. And one of if not the toughest conference in college basketball.
They got a transfer in from Indiana named Joey Brunk, a guy that has been tied to Chris Holtman when Chris Holtman was at Butler, 6'11", 250. But he's not kind of the guy you want that's going to be a starter, a focal point of the offense. He's a bench player. He might come in and start now, since Kyle Young is out indefinitely with, I forget exactly what injury that he currently has. But you're right. They don't have that guy. Brunk is tall, has some mass, but he's not the kind of guy that you want that's going to be like, hey, you're our big man. Be that big man. I watched Brunk play in high school as well. Kind of surprised he's playing in the Big Ten at a couple schools, but I do think that Chris Holtman will get the best out of him going forward in this year's season. Drew, very quickly, before we get to our predictions that I mentioned to you earlier today, what's one thing you're focused on with this Ohio State team? You can pick offense, defense, special teams, doesn't matter, going into this weekend's matchup against Nebraska.
I think, other than, nitpicking all those tiny things, because, Buckeye fans are perfectionists, and, we have an expectation of greatness. It's going to be just hitting them early, hitting them often, and just absolutely demoralizing them, because I feel like Nebraska is almost at a point where they're getting a little bit tired of Scott Frost in, all that hype that came in. Like, they were ready to take the Big Ten West. They were ready to compete for a playoff. And thus far, they haven't gotten anything. And if you would have told me, 5 years ago that the Scott Frost from UCF as well as PJ Fleck from Western Michigan are both going to come to the Big Ten, and only one of them are going to look good after a few years, I wouldn't have picked PJ Fleck. So it's going to be assert your will, get it done, do your job. I mean, honestly, with Nebraska shouldn't be anywhere close in this game. And the Buckeyes have the dogs to just absolutely pound on them. Like, people rag on Ohio State for not winning some Big Ten games like as blowouts as, an Alabama and a Georgia do to the Vanderbilts or the Tennessees of the world. This week and Purdue are the weeks to really pound on some lesser Big Ten teams and get completely right for that probably undefeated Sparty team on November 20th, I believe it is.
Good, yeah, November 20th. I do believe, though, this Nebraska team, they've been very, 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 very close. In all 6 of their losses, they lost them all by single digits. I believe they're 8 points or less. They lost every game by 8 points or less. I mean, Michigan won in the very last second to kick. It was a 3-point win, Michigan State over Nebraska. They were really close to beating Oklahoma in that game. I know the fourth quarter was a little bit different. I do think it was a 7-point win for Oklahoma. They've been close in numerous games. They don't have the same amount of talent that other schools have, And I thought Scott Frost was starting to put some things together. I don't know if it's Adrian Martinez. I don't know if it's Frost and some things that he's putting together. I'm not sure what the problem is. But that team, if you're not ready in the RPO game that they're going to pull at you, I'm not ready. And I don't want to look at this game and say, oh, it's Oregon once again in November. I don't want to do that because I will come on this show and probably show a lot of frustration because Ohio State should beat Nebraska by at least, and I do believe by at least 21 points. Drew, I mentioned something to you about predictions. Did you have something to say about the whole Nebraska thing I just said?
Just that the Buckeyes need to avoid an Urban Meyer letdown like they did with Iowa and Purdue. Those were, there's no reason they should have lost those games, but for whatever reason, Urban had this thing where you just lose to lesser opponents. And obviously, the Buckeyes haven't had to deal with that with Ryan Day because he only has one regular season loss, and his other losses are to Clemson and Alabama in the college football playoff. So I think he'll get them right. They just have to avoid that letdown because this Penn State game was so physical and grueling and emotional, as you could see by the fact that the fans stormed the field.
Very true. Very true. Drew, you probably heard me give my predictions as far as what I think the committee will do as far as their top four, then the first two out, top six of the committee. I have not given what I think the top four teams are, and I'm not doing that right now. I will go over my top four and then first two out, and then I'll ask you what your predictions are, what you personally think the committee will do. For 1 through 4 for me, if you missed it on the Monday show, Georgia number 1, Alabama number 2, Michigan State number 3, then Oklahoma number 4. That's my prediction about what I think the committee will do with the first college football playoff ranking. Drew, what do you think the committee would do with numbers 1 through 4?
I think that you're pretty much spot on. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if they flipped Oklahoma and Ohio State.
Okay.
Obviously, Ohio State does have that one loss with Oregon, but Oklahoma just recently this is the first game that they've won convincingly. Now, Connor Williams is looking like the true freshman stud that everyone has hyped him up to be, but there's still that lingering thing. I think if Oklahoma remains undefeated through the year and the Buckeyes finish even as a Big Ten champ with that one loss, things might have to happen for the Buckeyes to feel comfortable, like Alabama losing to Georgia a second time. But yeah, Georgia number 1, no reason to drop them. Their defense is legitimate. It's ugly. Like, I would love to see the Buckeyes go against that Georgia defense just because it's 1 versus 1, best versus best. 2, Alabama, I get it. I would agree that that's what they would do. I may not agree that that's what should happen because of that one loss. But, in the SEC, you have quality losses, and I guess Texas A&M is a quality loss. Number 3, it would not surprise me if they put Sparty there because you do have that human element, and seeing them beat up on little brother with, Kenneth Walker scoring all 5 touchdowns and looking absolutely ridiculous, it would not surprise me. I would say Buckeyes at 4, Oklahoma 5, and Cincinnati at 6. I love watching the Bearcats, but this year has not been as impressive as the year that UCF was coming off of their national title, when they, beat Auburn and then ran the table again and then lost to, and then ignited Joe Burrow. But yeah, I think UC will be 6th, but with wins over SMU possibly twice and Houston, I think later on this year, they might have their chance. But they do have there's only 2 teams in the top 10 with top 10 wins. Oregon on the road at Ohio State and UC at Notre Dame, which is, it may not be as impressive as Oregon, but it's looking more and more impressive as Notre Dame keeps winning.
One of the craziest things I heard, and I'm going to close it out with this, Wake Forest is still undefeated, and they may end the season, even if they win the ACC championship, 13-0 without one top 25 win. That's how weird the ACC is this year, with their schedule and everything like that. I want to say they play North Carolina coming up, but I believe that's a non-conference game because they did a weird home and home agreement last year. But college football is fun. The committee rankings will come out tonight. This is just a talking point. We'll have more talking points at the end of that show, as we will be recapping that instantly at the end of that as well. Drew, this has been fun, man. A lot of fun. If you could, let people know where they can catch you on Twitter and some of the things you guys are doing at Last Word on Sports.
So you can follow me and all of my really bad sports takes at LWOS Drew on Twitter. So Last Word on Sports is its own. It is just one big network of sites. So Last Word on Sports actually has Last Word on NFL, college football, basketball, etc. And then the site that I manage is a subsect of it. It's LWO Sports, where we don't focus on a specific sport. We give the writers all the liberty to write about whatever sport they want, obviously, as long as they back it up. Mostly we kind of do focus on like lists, like top 10 Heisman candidates for this year or something like that. And we have been slowly growing, very, very slowly, because of how, how saturated the sports media world is right now. But yeah, LWOsports.com. I've written about 102 articles in the last couple of years, mostly focusing on the Buckeyes. But every winter, because it's the greatest time of the year, I preview every single bowl game by conference. And that's a good, 11, 12 articles. And I love it because you get to see all the guys that are breaking out, and then you get to get a feel for who's going to be coming up next. And it also helps with, I write about my Cincinnati Bengals, who absolutely bungled it on Sunday. I write about them, and it also helps with, writing about draft work as well. But if, anyone who's listening is interested, you can always go to LWOsports.com. You can shoot me an email. It's just Drew Crabtree, my name, 221@gmail, with a writing sample, and we will definitely get back to you. But this has been a lot of fun. I love the Locked On Podcast Network, and this has been a massive honor for me to come on and share my thoughts about, the best damn team in the land.
Absolutely. We'll have to do it again down the road.
Yes,
Down the road, Big Ten Championship. Sometime we'll get you back on down the road. Guys, you guys can always follow me on Twitter at JStevens07. I hinted at it earlier. We will have an instant reaction to the playoff rankings that come out tonight. So make sure you're following us on YouTube, Locked On Buckeyes on YouTube, and my personal Twitter page will go live, instantly reacting to where the Buckeyes fall, where other teams fall, and kind of see what the committee is thinking about college football teams during the 2021 season.